of time. I know there's a world outside. Why can't I just sleep at night? These voices in my mind, and all I hear is danger.
Okay, welcome back to the melt season update, and today we have two updates for volume and extent. And for the Arctic sea ice volume, we have now data for 2 more weeks, and that is this green week and this yellow week. And if you're curious about the color code, you can check out episode 4 of the melt season updates. And the last time I stressed that we need, in order to have an ice-free Arctic Ocean at the end of summer, we need really red level melt for the rest of the weeks of the melt season. And so we didn't get that. We got a green week and a yellow week. And even though some of these numbers look big, they are, in the case of the yellow week, it's just bigger than the average of the 2010s decade, while the green week has lower melt than the 10-year average normal. So none of these are red level, which is the next level after yellow, and therefore, and even though the very last day of May had a decent amount of melt, a red level melt, we're not getting there, and we're not looking likely to get there, at least the way it looks now per 31st of May. So that's the update for volume. Everything can happen, of course, in the coming weeks, and we're coming up to the summer solstice, and the weeks around summer solstice have traditionally the biggest amount of melt, especially on the July side of solstice. So it's going to be interesting to see. So over to extent. There we have 3 new weeks of data, this green one and the 2 yellow ones, and yeah, as you can see for yourself, it's not something that looks very dramatic. We needed red level melt for all the rest of the weeks in on average, and we didn't get it. We got a cold green level and a slightly warm yellow level melt, and that's not taking us to the ice-free Arctic in September the way it looks now anyway. So the only thing special about these past 3 weeks for 2021 anyway was that that week alone was the middle week here was had the highest melt of the 5 years on screen. But, not even that is going to cut it, because this is about the entire season and whether or not we're going to have enough melt for the entire season. So, with that, we'll just await the next update for volume and extent. In about 2 weeks from now, we should have the volume update for mid-June. Right. So the biggest climate cope out there is this idea that climate change is something far away in the future, or variations thereof. And for this week's episode, I've looked at a new paper from Earth System Dynamics, published on 3rd June 2021. And I've only looked at the very first sentence from the abstract of this paper. It's a long paper, several pages, and I only got to the very first sentence of the sort of synopsis or abstract, and that's what I've presented on the left side of this graph, and it gets a lot of things wrong. It says that with progressing global warming, there is an increased risk that one or several tipping elements in the climate system might cross a critical threshold, resulting in severe consequences for the global climate ecosystems and human societies. So I guess a lot of reviewers and peers, that's to say other climate scientists, have looked at this since it was first submitted on in April 2020. That's like 14 months ago, 1 year and 2 months ago, and they're fine with it. They're totally fine with this sentence. So I don't know. Maybe that's just because everybody has this difficulty of seeing what's wrong with it or what it actually tries to say. So I presented a different narrative using many of the same basic terms, and in my alternative presentation it says that with one or several tipping elements in the climate systems having now crossed a critical threshold, which is apparent from the resulting progressing global warming, there is an increased risk for severe consequences for the global climate ecosystems and human societies. So you're not just randomly having a progressing global warming. You have a progressing global warming because some of the feedback mechanisms that used to be in balance, not with the tipping point not crossed, have been put out of balance so that the tipping point is crossed and there is a point of no return for one or several tipping elements in the climate system. And that's why you're having a progressive global warming. It's not like global warming goes berserk and it gets warmer and warmer, faster and faster, and then all of a sudden you get a climate tipping point crossed. That's putting the cart before the horse. It's like I used to be a copy editor and even a first reader of books for a publishing house. Like mostly fictional climate novel type of books. And if somebody were to write a sentence in their story, in their fictional story, where the cart was before the horse, the cart was pulling the horse, and the horse sort of stumbled on down the streets after the cart, you'd sort of think that was a bit weird, and as a first reader, you have to point these things out if there are some kind of strange or illogical things going on in a text, even though the text is fictional. So the way you could accept the cart dragging the horse is that the author was making a major point about it, that this was kind of a bizarre world, everything was upside down, blah, blah, blah. But if the author only writes this once, like all the other times he or she describes a horse and a cart, it's the horse first and the cart after, and you could also accept it if it was like if it was an accident and they stumbled out of the road and fell down the slope, fell down the hill with the cart before the horse, and some kind of freak accident like that. All right. So if you try to write that the cart was pulling the horse in a novel, you have to it has to be made a point of, because it's not what you expect, right? so odds would be that, okay, he's just made a kind of a mistake. It's like a typo. He typed this sentence too fast, and then the cart was dragging the horse in that sentence. So that's kind of something you just correct or suggest a correction. But then another case is if the novel is 500 pages, and even though the rest of the story is happening in a real kind of world that feels real in all other aspects. If repeatedly the cart is dragging the horse, if you have horse transport in that novel, you would suggest a hard no to the managers of that publishing business, right? Because this guy or this girl clearly has a some kind of reality deficit in their author mind, and putting that kind of thing into a realistic story just makes it, not even wrong. It won't even be a published novel, right? So back to this scientific paper. They are actually suggesting that progressive global warming comes before the tipping elements, and not the other way around, which I have suggested on this other side. So I think if you're based in reality, there are tipping elements, tipping points that have been crossed. One is for Arctic sea ice, which this paper chose not to mention at all. Another tipping point that has been crossed is permafrost methane on land in Siberia, for instance, and also out at sea, which have tipped and then have been increasingly releasing methane and some digested methane as CO2 because of bacteria eating methane. So these tipping elements have been crossed already, and because of that, we have a very apparent progressing global warming, which is, progressing, going faster and faster, and putting us at a great risk for collapse of human society and further damage to the climate and ecosystems. So I'm just left wondering, is this a general opinion of a majority of climate scientists at Earth System Dynamics and their sort of scientist pool of writers, or maybe European and American climate scientists in general, that they actually believe more and more insane global warming comes first and sort of pushes the other things further down here, the tipping points, to be crossed somewhere in the future. It's always like 2100. These things could happen. The Arctic Ocean might be ice-free far in the future. Like I think in 2007, the IPCC would say that you could have 1 or 2 summers with no sea ice at the end of summer in the 2080s or 2090s. That kind of craziness, and it's kind of slowly getting back to more realistic timeframes as the editions of their report are published. Maybe because otherwise they would just be laughed at even more than they are laughed at now. I don't know. So I just view this as a clear case of climate cope. It's like they understand that we have a problem, as they would say, but in order to still have a career and in order to still get published, they try to make this a problem to be fixed later, and to be fixed in part with the insane fantasy technology that isn't even around, and they basically sound like they just want to leave it to new generations, younger generations, and sometimes they go as far as to encourage people to have more kids, because one of those new 1 billion kids in the next decades might come up with a solution for climate change, as if we don't know what the solutions already are. It's just to, do less of what we do, basically. So I'm wondering if you have a 14-month review session with these guys, with these scientists, and they have a clear lack of logic in the very first sentence in their paper. Isn't that a case where you would just throw out the paper and say, okay, sorry guys, you messed up. We won't bother to read the rest of your paper, because already the very first sentence is like, totally lacking in understanding of the system. I don't know. Or maybe it's the other way around, that these scientists actually wrote a very good and thorough paper on the chain of events between these tipping points, and then the editing board and the peer review process forced them to to put this silly sentence into their abstract, and also forced them to not include methane or RTCIs at all in their paper. I don't know. I wasn't a fly on the wall there, so maybe they spent those 14 months making the paper worse, making it less realistic, and just leaving it with the AMOC and the West Antarctic and Greenland and the Amazon as the only tipping elements in the climate system. So I know Paul Beckwith has criticized them for those things that they left out there. But, in my case, maybe it looks like a shallow analysis, but I kind of think of it as going even deeper, even though I'm just reviewing the very first sentence of the abstract. But, this is what I call climate cope. It's related to lying, but it's like a collective coping mechanism. You consciously or unconsciously deny a lot of things, a lot of obvious things, like obvious things like this is already gone too far, and then we can take it from there. But if you look at it with an open mind, it's everything that follows will have to be equally ridden with lies and logical errors. Like, let's just pretend that Greenland starts melting massively in a vacuum, like they do in the paper, and not include the fact that when Greenland's coasts are getting increasingly ice-free, that also heats up the Greenland ice sheet, inside on land in Greenland, and stuff like that. Maybe you have to actually live here in Greenland like I do in order to see how that is ludicrous, but I would guess that 14 months of review process before this paper is even published should do away with that kind of silly, stupid kindergarten mistakes. But that's just me, perhaps. Okay. Take care, don't get the COVID, and bye.
It looks like it's going, if I understand course right, it looks like this is going south.
It looks like it's going, if I understand course right, it looks like this is going south.
You may know him from his own YouTube channel, Going South, although he seems to be going north every time I talk to the man. At his YouTube channel, Going South.
Yes.
We had Jeremy.
Yeah,
Corbyn,
everything's going south. Yeah, everything
sure.
is
It's
going
all going
south.
south, right?
Yeah,
Right. It's going south, but it's not all or nothing. It doesn't mean that it goes south until everything completely vanishes.
Yeah, but do you think
right? Which many people can easily say that,
Yeah.
it's all going south. There's absolutely
Okay.
nothing we can do.